So these days I feel like we hear a lot about video game piracy, and to be fair, for good reason. Yeah, I mean, just using Nintendo as an example, I've talked about how in the past 2 or 3 years now, pretty much every major Nintendo game that has been released, it ends up getting a sort of a pirated version that comes out usually like 2 or 3 weeks before its launch. It's happened like with the two recent Legend of Zelda games, for example. It's also happened with the new Super Mario Party game, Super Mario Wonder as well, the list goes on. And it's not just Nintendo, to be fair, but I feel like we just hear a lot about it with Nintendo. It seems to be more of an issue. I've heard a lot of that is because of certain protections that Xbox and PlayStation games have that require, day one updates to be playable. Nintendo just really doesn't go by that system. And so anyway, with piracy itself, I've always kind of wondered, how much does it cost a gaming company? Because obviously people are snagging pirated copies of these games that, some anyway would have actually legitimately purchased the game had that pirated copy not be available online. But that doesn't speak for everybody. Not everybody that plays a pirated game would have otherwise bought it for, full purchasing price. So there was actually a peer-reviewed journal that just tackled exactly this. This is by William Volckmann. It was published in Entertainment Computing. Now, this study was focusing on PC games released between 2014 and 2022, so about an 8-year span. And specifically, it was focusing on Denuvo protected games. Now, Denuvo is a certain sort of like software protection, I believe. I just heard about it for the first time the other day, actually. It's kind of common with some games these days. Basically, it is what's called a digital rights management product, or DRM. It is, by its own definition, an anti-tampering software. I'm not smart enough to understand exactly how it works, but basically it makes it much tougher for games and other products to be pirated. Made into ROMs and then distributed online. So it looked at 86 different games over this 8-year span, and it basically looked at when quote-unquote cracked versions of these games became available, and it kind of just looked at the revenue loss that they experienced at that time and kind of compared it to the natural revenue loss that they would have gotten over time, since the revenue of games, movies, products, everything pretty much goes down every day after its release. Now, in a nutshell, what it found is that when a pirated version of a game became available, on average, that would decrease the game's revenue by 19%. So yeah, almost 20%, almost a fifth of the game's revenue is effectively lost once piracy is available for that game. Now, this study also talked about basically the significance of when a cracked version of the game becomes available. Like I said, revenue is, at its highest at day one, and it just goes down after its launch. So basically, the earlier a pirated version of a game becomes available, the more revenue it loses, since revenue is highest, early on. Obviously, you can see how, cracked versions becoming available for Nintendo games these days before launch day, that is incredibly burdensome, I guess I would call it, on the developers and the publishers. Yeah, I'm going to use the new Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, for example. So that game was available, I think, about a week before launch. Yeah, it was available in like a pirated version, unfortunately. So I'm seeing that game sold a little over 200,000 physical copies during its first week. So doing some math, assuming that is after a 20% loss, that would mean that on average, if this study is correct, yeah, it sold 200,000 copies in the first week, but it should have sold another 40,000 copies. And I don't know what like the base price of that game was on week one. It's kind of hard for me to see that right now because all the prices now are a little bit different, but let's just say assuming it was just a flat $50 revenue from each copy sold, that would mean just in the first week Nintendo was out $2 million just from piracy. And that value each week would go down significantly, but yeah, you get the picture. Obviously, I get it. I mean, the revenue is definitely going to be severely decreased, and it does make me feel a little bad, I guess. I don't know, kind of giving Nintendo crap over the past year now that I've been, talking about stuff like this. Nintendo can be very strict, I guess, when it comes to their IPs, but I don't know, seeing it from this perspective, I guess I do get it. But like I said, it is important to note, I'm just yapping about Nintendo here. Obviously, piracy affects, any and every video game company. We didn't know really before what the cost of this was, but now we do. Unfortunately, it is a lot of money.